right out of the way so that you can see a bit easier. So just to begin, so our first presentation of the night is going to be Alex Berry. So Alex is an engineer at OMAFRA in the environmental management branch, where he assists on a number of projects related to soil health, climate change, and nutrient management. He grew up on a farm in Bowmanville, Ontario, and received a master's in mechanical engineer from the University of Guelph, focusing on vibration control for off-road vehicles. So I am just going to stop mine, and then Alex, do you want to share your screen?
Will do.
Perfect.
Steps. Wrong screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of jumping ahead. Question title. This is kind of jumping ahead in the grand scheme of things. We're going to just jump right into low pressure inflation tires in the field, good. High pressure inflation tires on the road, bad. And the best way to do that is either hire a university student. Yeah, at this point, a university student. Hire a teenager, pay the minimum wage to run around and continuously inflate and deflate your tires all year. And if you hired them for 27 hours a week to do that job, you could easily pay for a CTIS system. So central tire inflation systems, not rocket science by any means. So you're going to have some sort of air pump. You're going to have an air storage, perhaps, depending on the volume of tire you have. Sometimes it's beneficial to have a large, already pre-compressed storage of air sitting on the machine, a regulator to modify the pressure in the system, and then some sort of electrical control to talk to the regulator, and then continuously ask the tires how much air pressure they have in them at any point in time. So that's it for as far as the technological advances go on CTIS. It just makes it so that you don't have to drive up to the shop. You don't have to get the air hose out. There's no tire chucks involved. You can just kind of jump into things. So why use it? Well, it allows you to set up tire pressures to be best set for individual operations. So now, raise your hand if you've set your tire pressures for every piece of equipment for every task that it does. So if I have a 4-wheel drive tractor, does anybody change the tire pressure, whether it's doing heavy tillage or pulling the grain cart or, this central tire inflation allows you to do that, again, without driving up to the shop, without getting involved and, kneeling on gravel and all this stuff. It also allows it to be changed during the operation. So now not only can I think about it and, oh, hey, I'm tilling today with this tractor, I should lower my tire pressure. That's going to give me some better fuel economy, more traction, generally better all around. But now I can also change it when I'm done this field. I can pump the tires back up, get a higher pressure to go between fields, and then start over again. So it really takes kind of the effort involved in modifying your pressures for pieces of equipment, but it doesn't take away the sort of the thought behind what you need to do. So speaking of that, what do you put in your tires? This is a question everyone's probably had, and if you were to look at your implements in the manual, the manufacturer has probably spec'd a tire pressure, but that normally is erring on the side of too high for most cases. So they're assuming worst case scenario load, especially if it's something like a manure spreader or something. So the best thing to do is to weigh your piece of equipment. Best way is to weigh individual tires with pad scales. But if you can't do that, get an estimate for axle weights individually and kind of guess the load sharing between the tires. That's going to get you the closest. And once you have that information, you can decide how fast am I going to travel? and what PSI do I need to do that. So air pressure setting. So like I say, air pressure setting becomes simple. There's no driving around. There's no air hoses involved. Well, there's air hoses involved, but usually only once. There's none that you have to coil back up after you're done. So for your tire, pick a 710 tire here just for the sake of it seems to be the most common right now. All the information's written somewhere on the side of the tire. And if they're too old that you can't read them, you should probably be replacing them anyways. So 710 is the tread width in millimeters. 70 is the aspect ratio in percentage. So that's the ratio of sidewall to the width of the tire. So in this case, it would be 70% of 710 millimeters. And then mixing units, which is the best way to do things, the rim size is in inches. So in this case, it's a 42-inch rim. So it's a little bit hard to discern, overall heights of tires, but all the information is there. There was going to be something called a load index number. This is really only important if you're in the market to buy new tires. So say I have a grain cart, I know it needs to have, maybe 15,000 pounds on each tire. Well, I can go to the load index in the catalog and eliminate all of the tires that aren't going to carry that weight. So a 173 is an indication of that maximum load. So I can narrow down my search for what I'm looking for. Speed code rating, this is something to keep an eye on, especially if you're putting kind of an ag style tire on a highway rated vehicle. The speed rating is the maximum safe travel speed for that tire. So you don't want to overspeed an ag tire on a highway tractor doing 80K down the highway because it has a tendency to just shorten its life quite dramatically and sometimes spectacularly. TL, tubeless, and then some 11 herbs and spices, depending on the what the manufacturer wants to call it, and if they have any specific branding or otherwise. So once you find all that information, you Google, or call your tire folks and ask them for the catalog. And at that point, you can look up your width and aspect ratio on the left-hand side. Do I have a laser pointer? Is that a thing? No. Annotate. There we go. So you look that up over there. Come across this middle information is really only important if you're looking to buy new tires or replace them with something that's functionally equivalent. And then the meat and potatoes is over usually on the right-hand side of that, and that's load capacity. So making the assumption that we've already weighed our piece of equipment and estimated what the tire has to carry, we can look here. If we want to travel 5 miles per hour at 12 PSI, I can carry 10,000 pounds, for instance. This is not a real inflation table, not a real tire. But if I want to do 30 miles per hour, I got to be somewhere north of 20 PSI to be able to safely carry that load. So now that I have those two numbers for my two, field versus road speed operations, I type that into my controller on my CTIS system. And now at the flip of the switch, I can bounce between those two systems. And some systems are even better to the point where you can add multiple levels, like halfway or 3/4 loaded or something such like that. All right. Now I need to do that thing where I have goofed this all up. There we go. So pressure changes, temperature effects. So this is something that I noticed after I bought a new truck and joined the 21st century with tire pressure monitoring on my vehicle. In the middle of winter, when it got down to -15, all of my tire pressures started screaming at me that my pressures were too low. So being curious, I did the math. Pressure is going to change 0.3% of what the pressure already is for every 1 degree change in Celsius, 1 degree Celsius change in temperature. So not a big deal in kind of the summer months, less than a percentage probably throughout the day. But well, maybe not. 20 to 32 degrees is a pretty big change. Whereas on a fall day, if you set them, in the afternoon, at 15 degrees or something. And then overnight in the morning, by that time it was down to 5, or even 20 down to 5. 15-degree temperature change is going to be about a 5% change in pressure. Now, on a highway tractor with 100 pounds, 95 to 100, that's not a huge deal. But when you're down into the big tires with the big volumes and the low pressures, 5% starting to pretty drastically change that footprint size. So that can take you from something marginal to something that might cause compaction. You might be on that just ragged edge of causing compaction or not. So there's some things to consider with CTIS. That's all that I have for now.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And we have Ian McDonald with us now, who's going to be our official griller and the next presenter. Ian, how you doing?
If you can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I asking Alex a question now?
Yeah.
Big softball.
So, Alex, we've done a lot of work on the inflation systems with the compaction days and stuff. I guess my question is, what equipment makes the most sense for getting the best value out of installing CTIS?
So that's a question. The obvious ones are the big heavy things that need to do a lot of road travel. So come to mind immediately, manure tanks, grain buggies. If you're doing a lot of road travel, normally they're not full on the road though. So if you're in that situation where you're never going to pull a hugely loaded grain buggy on the road, probably not a big deal. So in that case, I would probably look at what's my unloaded weight at 25 miles an hour. What's that pressure versus what's my loaded weight at field. And realistically, that's going to be close to the same. I haven't met a grain buggy operator yet that doesn't, stay under 18 mile an hour in the field. So something to consider there.
Absolutely.
But what comes to mind that people might not think of is balers or hay and equipment, forage harvesters especially. There's a lot of weight on the front wheels of a forage harvester, and they got to go down the road just like everybody else, and they never get any lighter. So that would be one that springs to mind that people might not immediately think of for inflation systems. And a simple little system, you don't even need a large air tank to effectively change the pressure or to make sense for a forage harvester. Big volume tire, you can stop and clean your machine off or eat your lunch while it's inflating the tires in those situations. So that's what comes to mind for me.
Thanks, Alex. Who's next, Tori?
So next is going to be your presentation, Ian.
Okay, let's share it up then.
Perfect. Okay, so just before you begin, I'm just going to introduce you. So Ian has been the Applied Research Coordinator for the Field Crops Unit of OMAFRA since 2000, and before which he spent 15 years in the ag industry as a researcher on new pesticides with DuPont. Since July of 2016, he's been assigned to the role of Crop Innovation Specialist with the unit. Ian holds a PhD in Ag Environmental Science from the University of Guelph. He's involved in the coordination of research and demonstration activities with OMAFRA and the Agriculture Development Branch with the Field Crops Unit. So whenever you're ready, Ian.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so Tori asked me to talk about load, and it's something that not a lot of people put attention to, even though our equipment's getting bigger. So I want to talk about that. And we're going to talk about best management practices throughout this evening. And here's a bunch of different best management practices that can be applied in the context of compaction avoidance or compaction fighting. But we're going to concentrate in this little 5-minute to go on the whole aspect of load. So this equipment is getting bigger and bigger. This is some equipment that was in the show for 2017 Innovative Farmers Compaction event at Shaw Ridge Farms, and 29 tons on the quad track and another 50 tons following behind in the tanker. And just look right here, you can see the track just from the tractor alone, let alone when the tanker comes across, and the amount of compression that's happening as a function of that weight. And so if we look at this little table from Jody DeJong in Wisconsin, it sort of highlights a bunch of axle loads for different equipment that, you know, is a little bit on the big side, but is becoming more and more common across the landscape in the Corn Belt and Ontario and other areas. And so when we think about how much weight's out there, we need to think about it in terms of what is the environment that we're working with. So, you know, what is the legal axle load on roads in Ontario? Anybody that's got a truck over the road knows that. And that limit is 11 tons per axle, or 10 ton per axle. And it's interesting, and why is that so low relative to these types of weights that we're putting on to our farm fields? And it's primarily because the goal is not to destroy those roads with all that heavy traffic over there that makes a mess of all of the engineering that went into building those roads. And so roads are purpose built to carry loads, which soil is not. And I think that's an important thing that we have to think about, especially in light of what the roads are restricting it at with the 11 tons. And so when we do this on the roads, and then we are commonly putting well above that legal load limit on the ecosystem, or the biological ecosystem out there in our farm fields, which I always like to think of as soil is a living environment, dirt is just dirt that the engineers and the construction people play around with. But I think it's important that we think about these weights and the impact that they're having out there in our landscape. And so what's the generally accepted ag load standard? And it traditionally in North America has been try and get under 10 tons per axle. And the work that Matthias Stettler has been doing out of Switzerland, and in work with Thomas Kellner in Sweden and other people, he really thinks that we have to be in this less than 5 tons per axle and less than 15 PSI in the field inflation pressure. And so again, when you look at this chart on the left, it gives you an indication of maybe we are pushing the limits here quite a bit. And so the question becomes, how big is too big? And I want to talk about that a little bit. And I'm looking at big equipment because it has the most impact in terms of making us think about it. But you'll see as I go through that some of the small equipment from the past was problematic as well. So if we look at an example of sort of current grain cart sizes, and we look at 1,000 bushel, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 bushels, 1,000 bushels is getting to be more and more common. We don't see that many big ones, but it's going to move that way because of the logistics and the capacity of these big combines. But when you look at the empty weight of the cart, you look at how much corn that they can hold in terms of weight, and the full weight that we're putting out in that landscape on a ton basis, you know, 25, 38, 51, 64 tons of weight driving across that landscape. And so Alex was interested in helping us better understand, what did that mean? What does 25 tons mean? Well, it means about 1 semi-load of grain at one time. If you go to 1,500, 1.3 semis. If you go to 2,000 bushel, 1.9, almost 2 semi-loads. And as you go to 2,500, 2.1 times or trailers you need to move that corn out of the field. And keep in mind that as your size increases, the horsepower needed to pull that buggy out in the field increases, and the weight of these units increases substantially as well. Another interesting fact is, if you compare a 1,000 bushel to a 2,000 bushel grain cart, what's interesting is that the one 2,000 bushel cart versus two 1,000 bushel carts is 20% heavier, because you need that much more metal and guts under it to hold the weight that it's designed to carry. So I want to think about weight and load and mass in the context of the standard trestle bridge. And often these have restrictions on the weight that you can carry, and they're not all over the place, but it's just a good way to think about how weight and mass and load come into play. And so considering that the three of those things are equal, think about it in the context of a late 70s era Gleaner L2 compared to a modern S680, and which one of these full are you going to take across that bridge or have the courage to take across that bridge? And so this is a little example that I use to try and sort of put it in your head what some of this stuff means. And I like this little analogy. So I got a 15-pound little sumo wrestler here, and I got me weighing in at about 205 pounds, and I got Papa's sumo wrestler weighing in at somewhere between 450 and 550 pounds, right? So quite a difference in the weight there. And so I ask you these questions. And I think about it in terms of the Beatles song, Imagine. And imagine that you're lying on the ground, belly up, and little Junior is going to sit there and beside you and roll across your belly. Is that going to hurt? And in another context, he's going to stand up and he's going to walk across your belly. And is that going to hurt? And really not either one of those configurations is going to hurt. But what happens if I lie down beside you and roll over your belly? And I'm not, just think about it as an analogy. If I roll over your belly, is that going to hurt? Well, 205 pounds, I can probably take that, right? But if I stand up and take my big size 10 feet and walk across your belly, is that going to hurt? Well, of course it's going to hurt, right? And so think about the configuration between rolling over you and walking over you at this weight of 205 pounds. Now, Papa Sumo Wrestler comes out. Do you really care whether he rolls over you or walks over you? Are you going to really notice any difference there? Either way, in my opinion, it's going to hurt like hell and to be avoided at all costs. And so the aspect of the weight and the configuration plays into the game, and that applies in the case of myself, but it doesn't really apply in the case of sumo wrestler. Regardless of the configuration, it hurts, right? Okay, so let's look at some statistics on Gleaner versus the 680, okay? And the ones I really want you to pay attention to are based on the tires, singles 30 or 23.1 30Rs, and in this case 580 85 R42s. Look at the difference in the footprint between 2 tires down here and 4 tires down here relative to the overall weight difference, essentially half the weight in the Gleaner than in the 680, okay? So when you think about that weight difference, it's significant, right? And so is this the sumo wrestler and this is Ian here from a weight perspective standpoint? So this one weighs in at 14.9 tons, okay? That's not too bad. This one weighs in at 33.1 tons with its 400 bushel hopper full. And I've got this restriction of 10 tons, and that 10 tons is probably on the best day. And think about all the weathering that's happened to that old bridge in time. Who's got the courage to run that big 680 across that bridge? Not me, that's for sure. An interesting fact, though, is that when you look at the tires versus the weight, 38.8 pounds per square inch is applied in the context of the L3. What do you think the John Deere is in terms of that? Is it way higher or way lower based on all that rubber that's hitting the ground? Well, surprisingly enough, it's not very much different at all. So from a compaction perspective, in terms especially shallow, you're probably not seeing that much damage relative to the old Alice Chalmers combine. But the axle weights and the tire pressures would mean that difference. So you are going to get more compaction deeper down with that heavy combine. And so we need to think about the fact that there may be not much difference in the square inches or the pounds per square inch, but there is in the total mass that's being exerted onto that soil. And so my question becomes, do you need to take that next step up in size? And some people will say yes. And then if that's the case, do you need to fill it all the time so that if you have tough soil conditions out there, can you just not fill it so that you don't exert all of the stress that the total capacity of that unit might be capable of? So again, big grain buggies is a good example. So that's it. That's all I got. Back to you, Tori.
Thanks, Ian. And Ian, you deferred from the 5-minute allotment.
I see that. I apologize.
So we're going to move on, but we'll have lots of opportunity for question and answer when we're in the group with you, as well as when we're coming back together for the big Q&A session afterwards. But Robin, who's our next buddy? Oh, Tony.
So our next presenter is Tony. So Tony is an independent agronomist specialist based out of Southern Ontario. As the owner of Nithfield Advanced Agronomy, he manages thousands of acres of cropland across several countries. He's also the third generation farmer who owns farms in the Oxford and Brant areas. His farming operations is the foundation for the Nithfield's R&D program and consists of more than 400 acres of full production field scale research systems. Tony has been working with producers for over 10 years. He's a certified crop advisor and a graduate of the University of Guelph and is educated at the University of Illinois, where he specializes in crop sciences. So Tony, if you want to share your screen, and then you can begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Robin. How's that up?
Yep.
So thanks for the introduction. I'm the owner of Nithfield Advanced Agronomy, and it's kind of a two-department business where we farm and operate about 1,000 acres, and about 600 of that is field scale research. And then I'm also an independent agronomist that consults with growers as well. So specifically about the farm and some of the structure we have in place there, initially our controlled traffic system kind of came about through all of our research, where we started to record and measure swaths and have consistent, repeatable patterns across farms to be able to do the research at field scale. And through that, since about 2012, actually, it's kind of morphed into the controlled traffic that everybody's kind of striving to and stuff like that. So one of the cool things that we kind of learned right off the start was with back in 2012, we were still getting a lot of custom work done, and we had a neighbor combining and stuff. So I actually put a GPS beacon on his grain buggy, just kind of a cheap one that you can put on anybody's car, and recorded everywhere that he went at harvest. And this is kind of the map that I got back. And as you can see, it's pretty amazing to see once you record something as random like that, where there's just no structure. Well, there's a pattern. He was always trying to go to the truck, but nonetheless, there's just no pattern to the process. And that really sparked the execution of managing all our own equipment, guidance lines, and things like that. So one of the things we executed right off the get-go, and we still do this today, is our equipment planning is huge. So when we built the controlled traffic system, we started working with a 90-foot primary swath, so that we refer to that as our primary, which would be our sprayer. Each one of these little dashes, you can see my mouse there. Each one of these little dashes indicates a tire in our system. So the sprayer is a pull behind currently on a 60-inch center, and then all the other systems like our planter, our strip till, and our side dress equipment is all on 60s and or 120s. The planter, strip till, and side dress, we have no, I call them kind of wing tires. We took a lot of that stuff off and simply run 3-point hitch systems now to mitigate kind of that extra track, if you will, around the outside. The combine runs on LTs now at 120s, and it actually has an extension on the unloading spelt, so the tractor and grain cart can actually execute a traffic line that one of the primaries and stuff. So that takes a lot of work and planning and years actually to get into this system, simply because as you roll equipment, as you buy equipment, as you change swath patterns, to make it all fit, it's quite a puzzle. So it took quite a bit. We've tried to do some 40, 120s with clients and things like that. And we're getting there, but we fail with the grain buggy still. And we're kind of still looking for equipment and upgrades to do something with that. But nonetheless, that's kind of the equipment planning template that we used, and have been doing this now for a while. Farm challenges, this block of kind of 600 acres, as you can see, is terribly shaped fields. Because we own a lot of land right around a river, it's primarily really good soils, but the patterns and challenges of just boundaries and things like that, these fields just are really hard to make nice straight lines out of and stuff. So each field has a plan, and it is a guidance plan that is preloaded into every monitor. So we have things like, a multi-polygon field like this, where there's 3 fields within the farm. Each field has a labeled adaptive headland. Because everything's on a 90-foot primary, it's 90 feet of headlands. We have our dedicated AB lines, main guidance lines. We use guidance lines with usually an A+ heading. If we ever have to get custom in, like a sprayer or anything, when we're doing like high clearance work or something like that, we can just load in a lot of those guidance lines regardless of what technology he's running, and he can hit all of our patterns quite well. So that's one thing that we're currently doing. We're happy with where we're at with equipment. We're happy where we're at with being able to repeat, stick to that controlled guidance, even in terrible shaped fields. But we still struggle consistently with headland performance. So this particular farm, and this is just a snapshot on this farm, but on this 15, it's about 15 acres worth out of the 80, that is headlands. Because of the terrible shape, the headlands add up quite quick. So with these headlands themselves, we lose on average about $100 an acre on that 15 acres. So we've been counting this now for quite a few years, and we lose about 60 feet, 45 feet. And most of that's from, you can see the dense bush. We get lots of little animals and deer. We get shading. You get the water moisture competition from all the tree lines and things like that. So moving forward, and I'm going to highlight concept, because we are doing this at a super small scale, but I think it's something that I hope a few other farmers start to try. I've done a bit of work with some US farmers on this, and it seems to be kind of maybe a bit of a solution to some of these really challenging shaped fields that we have. So we started to execute some headland alfalfa at 45 feet around the perimeters. And the idea there was to sell it as dry hay. Well, that failed miserably, because when you try to do dry hay where it's wet and shady and full of trees, you just get wet hay all the time. So the idea was to have kind of a living mat, if you will, of alfalfa. You would cut it. A lot of the cuttings coincide with, planting and application times and stuff like that. And we were hoping that we could have it in such a way that at harvest, we would have, that bulk of living organism, if you will, where there's no really worked soil. And you can kind of use your headlands more as exit runs and things like that. So that's where it started, and now it's shifted into kind of this composting concept, where each field we are trying to take the corn stover and collect it on that corn year post corn harvest. And then when we rotate wheat and dry beans and soybeans through there, we would continuously cut that green hay, and we've started to just try to cut it wet, which is real easy to make hay if you don't have to dry it. And adding the wet green to the corn stover consistently in the off years that it isn't corn yeah, we are thinking we're starting to get a compost developed where we've really mitigated the logistics and challenges of trucking soil amendments and compost and all this stuff in, where we can actually just have kind of modular sites that stick within a field and then kind of utilize the compost that way. We see a great improvement in standability and yield when we remove the corn stover, obviously for dry beans, and we lose that carbon penalty and nitrogen tie-up and things like that. Whether or not we have a lot of fertility value and return on that said compost, yet to be determined. Again, like I said, we're still in the concepts of this, where we've tried a few 20-acre fields, another 30-acre field, things like that. And I think this year we're going to kick it up to about 300 acres, because with the clovers and the perimeter stuff, you know, it takes some time to establish anything there. So just to wrap up, that's kind of our controlled traffic plan from a farmer point of view. Some of the challenges that we are really headbutting on right now with our, you know, how do you integrate or control traffic with really inefficient headlands like ours? And this is kind of the stuff that we're throwing at the farm right now. And we're at about 1,000 acres. So it's a substantial amount of work if we were to execute this all the way. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. And I hope that kind of shows some of the planning and layout necessary to do successful controlled traffic from the equipment management point of view. So I'll leave everything with that. And I think I'm good for time.
Cool. And Ian, what's your big burning question for Tony?
I guess you get a lot of people interested in controlled traffic, but frustrated in terms of how to line up all the equipment. So is there a minimum width that you have to be at with all your equipment to make it pay financially and logistically?
I'm not sure I have economics to support that. I know in the world of equipment, just costs and things like that, I don't think you could go any smaller than a 3090. The 4120 seems to be ideal, but what we found economically when we were at looking at 40 and 120s, the combines and the grain buggies took a substantial investment to get it to line up tram line wise and things like that. It's definitely doable, but I think at our 1,000 acre-ish scale, it wasn't financially viable. When you kicked it up to, you know, the 2,000 plus or something like that, yeah, that's the size you want to go for sure.
Thanks, Tony.
That was perfect.
Sorry, I was trying to turn off my share here. Okay, you should be good.
Perfect. Can you guys see that? Perfect. So our last presenter is going to be Warren. He operates Cedar Lodge Farms in Morrisburg with his parents and his wife, Christine. Warren is a graduate from the Ag Economics program at McDonald College, McGill University. They produce corn, soybeans, wheat, and edible beans along the St. Lawrence River and have a beef feedlot. Warren is also the director with OSCIA and the 2019 recipient for the IFAO Initiative Farmer of the Year Award. Warren, if you just want to share your screen and then start whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. So Tony, fun fact, my sister-in-law lives 1 minute south of you. So you can probably expect me to wheel in your driveway some point. All right, so thanks for the introduction. Yeah, we're gonna dive right into it. Since we had a speaker drop out, Tori tasked me with 2 topics, but she only gave me 7 minutes. So it's 2 hours of material. We'll do our best. Thanks, Tori. All right, so I love this photo. It really shows a lot of what we're trying to accomplish on the farm. We're implementing tracks, large radial tires, central inflation, controlled traffic, no-till with proper residue management, and doing our best to get some sort of cover crop growing wherever we can. Whoops, what's going on? There we go. So one of the biggest things we did on our road to help our soils are primarily clay-based, some heavy clay, a lot of clay loam, very shallow with a very heavy clay subsoil. So soil compaction is our #1 yield robber, and it probably is right up there with water management, and those two link well together. So one of the best things we did for our soils was walk away from conventional tillage. We no-till all of our soybeans, we no-till all of our wheat, no brainer on those. We have covered crops going in both of those enterprises. It's corn where things can sometimes go south. This spring was a fine example of that with how cold and backwards it was. So we've opted to strip till our corn acres. And that has given us a lot of opportunities. We were dabbling with controlled traffic prior to strip tillage, but strip till has really helped kick that initiative right in the butt, because one of the main pillars of strip till is you don't drive where you plant. So just right off the bat, we've eliminated a lot of wheel traffic that's going to interfere with our cash crops, in this case corn, but also our edible beans. So controlled traffic. So much like Tony said, we also started with the sprayer. We have the 120-foot sprayer, a 60-foot planter, and a 40-foot strip tiller. So unlike Tony, none of our stuff matches. So I call what we do quasi-controlled traffic, and it's been working fairly well for us. I like this photo. It kind of demonstrates what we're trying to accomplish. There's 2 wheel tracks in that whole field of view. You can kind of see another tram off to the right from the strip till bar. But on this path, this is the perfect storm. Every 120 feet, we have multiple sprayer passes, 1 or 2 strip till passes, a planter pass, harvest pass, hopefully a grain cart pass, not always, but it's the perfect storm every 120 feet. So the sprayer is our main culprit. We have a large self-propelled sprayer, and we need a large self-propelled sprayer. It's doing multiple passes. This year has been the year of spraying absolutely everything. We've been 4 passes through the corn already, with the 5th hopefully in the next week or so, if the rain cooperates, interseeding cover crops into all our corn. That's 4 passes in the corn. Soybeans, the normal year, you're looking at 2. This year it was closer to 3. And we're doing our best to get winter wheat into the farm, minimum 4 passes with a sprayer to effectively manage a winter wheat crop. So without doing tillage, in a 3-crop rotation, that sprayer may pass that field 12 times in a nightmare scenario. So it's absolutely the #1 culprit, and it absolutely has to be running on those tram lines all the time. So the sprayer, so we also have included some central inflation systems on the farm. The first machine was the self-propelled sprayer, mainly because of its weight. It's traveling on the road full, and it has narrow tires, multiple passes a year. We already had 2 sets of tires, a set of 710 floaters, which was amazing when we first got them for those early spring applications. And then, of course, 3 380s for row crop. So we run the AgriBrink inflation system on both. Very pleased with the system. On the left is the rear axle of our combine. We have a tracked combine, but from doing research and helping out with the compaction days, more on that later, we found that it was probably going to pay to have the rear axle on the combine included. Alex explained inflation systems, but for us, it's all about optimizing the investment we've already made. We've invested in this rubber. We had nice radial tires, large, high volume with a large aspect ratio. But you kind of had to blend that high road speed, high weight with flotation. So we were running 17 PSI, and we were really sacrificing tire life. So now we're able to run 35 PSI on the road, and with the flip of a switch, be down to as low as 9 PSI for the field with a half load. So we're optimizing the tire and minimizing the impact of the weight in the field efficiently. It's worked very well. So on the left side, so this is some data from the Dundas Compaction Day. On the left side is your regular self-propelled sprayer that the co-op might show up at your field with. 380 tires. In this case, they were running 45 PSI, which is actually kind of low for a custom app because they're trying to maintain their tire life. And on the right is a fully optimized 710 floater. So it was running at 15 PSI. You know, it's a 50% reduction when you look at the average of roughly 20 on the left and 10 on the right. It's a big performance enhancement, and it's working well for us. The question I get a lot, well, I get the big tires, but what about the skinnies? Regardless, it's going to be high PSI, and it is. Right now with the 380s, we're able to run 25 PSI with a full tank and 19 PSI with a half tank. And so here we have from the same compaction day, on the left is the 380 running 25 PSI, and on the right is a 710 running 20 PSI, which is about where a custom applicator would run 20 or 710 floater tires, maybe even a little bit higher. And if you notice that gap is no longer very large, and it's certainly something to think about. Now the combine, we have tracks on the combine. Great, we solved compaction, wonderful. The fine folks at the Innovative Farmers brought the concept of these soil compaction days to Ontario. And the first one in Arthur, they ran a Lexion. It wasn't the same model as mine, but it was very similar, tracks and wheels on the rear. And they passed over, and look, the tracks are performing well. They're spreading the load out between all the individual axles. And all of a sudden the rear axle pops over and whoa, look what's happened here. We've almost doubled, you know, but we fixed compaction because we had tracks. Flash forward to last year where our combine ran over the sensor with a heavier head, I might point out. Again, the numbers on the left are different soil types, but the ratios and the trend lines are very similar. We're getting the nice spread out load. And now with the tires at 10 PSI instead of 25, or I believe they were over 30 in the previous image, we've evened out that load and evened out the soil compaction across both axles. All right, so that's topic one, is kind of what we're doing on the farm. It's all a system for us. We're bringing a lot of pieces together, you know, rotation and all that, it all comes into play. Topic two is on tracks. We run a pair of these Challenger tractors, 2-track tractors on 10-foot wheel spacing, and they're not necessarily for everyone. For the type of work we're doing, which is more tool carrying than high draft loads, they work very well for us. As you can see, why are tracks better? Well, in place of a single axle, we can now add, in this case, 5 axles to carry the same load that in a tractor would be 2. And you can see the numbers. So in the compaction day, we ran each axle individually over scales and got the weight distribution. And you notice it isn't uniform across the scales. And so in this case, the row track up front running the tracks, instead of 2 axles, there's 10. And on the cart, instead of a single axle or perhaps 2 axles, we now have tracks, so there's technically 4. And whenever we passed over, you can see that the load is spread out fairly nicely. But then the grain cart came along and it was doing well, but what's going on with the second bogie axle? You know, it's spiked up quite high, not as high as what a wheeled grain cart would be, but certainly higher than we would expect from tracks. And this winter, while speaking with actually a McGill Bioresource Engineering graduate who works for SUSE, we showed him this image and he immediately said, well, the track tension's out of whack. And we went, oh. And basically the geometry of tracks, the hydraulic pressure to give the track its tension so it doesn't come off on the road, it has to be balanced so that the load, well, what is that pressure? Is it 2,800? Is it 3,000? Farmer's not going to know. We're not going to be able to tell from this data. That we as producers really need to be asking the manufacturers, hey, I want to balance, I'm paying for balanced load. Why am I not getting it? All right, negatives of tracks. tracks are rough on the road, and when things go bad, it's really expensive to fix, as we found out with our combine. It's not something that will happen a lot. You know, you'll get pretty equivalent tire life to track life as far as road work goes. But it's when some of these undercarriage components fail or just need to be bushings changed, as is the case here, it's a substantial job to do, a lot of labor. Tracks are also not a license to do whatever the heck you want. You're still going to have to use your brains. If you are out there whenever conditions are not adequate, you're still going to cause compaction. You're still going to cause shear of your soil. You're going to cause ruts, and chances are you're going to get stuck. Because track tractors actually get, this is impressive for a track tractor to get stuck this deep. It's quite often pretty embarrassing when they get stuck. So you still have to have patience. And that would be my main take home, which is patience pays more than any investing in any iron will. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how I did for time, but
You did great. You did so good. Ian, you have 2 questions for Warren, I think.
Okay, so Warren, lots of people have explored tracks and tires, and you have both. And so I guess the question that would help everybody is, how do you decide which pieces of equipment need tracks versus tires in terms of what's the best investment?
That's a great question. It's going to differ farm to farm, I think. Kind of tying in like what Alex said about going to the load charts for tires. If you're struggling to find a tire that can actually carry the load, you're probably going to want to be thinking about investing in the track route there. Like the grain cart is a perfect example of that. But it's outstandingly expensive where tires are comparatively cheaper. I love the pineapple, Tori. So for us, you know, we have the track tractors, but now seeing what an inflation system with a, say, VF set of tires could do, I think I could accomplish the same goal in that tool carrier with a properly spec'd wheeled tractor and enjoy road travel a heck of a lot more. So it's really going to come down to me for load. A combine is a no-brainer. The load on the front axle is astronomical, and there's no way around it besides an army of L2s, apparently.
So you kind of answered my second question too, because when you look at all the tire technology in terms of size, in terms of type, in terms of construction, in terms of pressures that it can run at, the fact that you can put CTIS on, in terms of making those decisions on tracks versus tires, and I don't like to make it a competition, I like to make it based on a configuration for a use, can you pretty much meet the needs or the equivalency of tracks with the tire setups now? And so you said not really with combines, but maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, I believe you can. But you have to be willing to have very large tires and central inflation to, get the benefit out of them. But again, equipment is large. It seems to only want to be getting larger. I'd love to know what, we weighed several combines and it's 80, 90,000 pounds. We have a couple class 10 combines coming to the market that are carrying almost 20 tons just of grain. Yikes. So yes, I believe tracks and tires can equally perform, but not in all situations. It's all going to come down to load.
Thanks very much.
So now after we've listened to all of our presentations, I just wanted to kind of summarize all of them. And if all of the presentations can just give like a quick statement summary of the main takeaway you would like everyone to have. So do we want to start with Ian?
I guess from a load perspective is how much are you willing to carry and can your soil take it? And even though you have the load carrying capacity with the combine or a buggy or whatever, are you willing to adjust how full you fill it depending on the conditions out there in the soil at the time of year you're using it?
Yes.
Perfect. Tony, do you want to give your takeaway?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing is the equipment planning part. What you do today with controlled traffic affects your controlled traffic probably for the next 5 years. So it takes a lot of planning. Like Warren said, whether you're going to go with rubber or tracks, how your equipment, your sprayer, and things of that. And you got to stick with it. Like I said, it takes quite a few years to execute it, but it's well worth it if you can put the plan together.
Perfect. Alex?
Yeah, so for CTIS, it's not an onerously complicated set of tools. The components themselves are not complicated to install it on a machine. And don't write off the out-of-pocket expense. Don't try to justify that with a hard to nail down, cost savings on compaction reduction. To me, CTIS pays for itself with safer.
I think Big Tire got to him.
Alex, do you want to repeat some of that? Okay, Warren, do you want to talk about your takeaway?
Oh my.
You can
Well,
have two.
great. For me, it's definitely that last slide, patience pays. You could do everything right and be out there a day too early once and undo a lot of the good you've done. But I agree with what Alex was trying to say. In Europe, the CTIS is extremely commonplace. As Margaret pointed out in the chat, in Europe, a lot of cost share is done by the government, so it is subsidized, but it's a safety thing. It's the optimizing your investment. I think pretty well every farm, regardless of size, could justify a central inflation system on their main tractor. The technology works very well if you're patient.
Awesome. So now we're going to move into our hallway huddles. So these are going to be a group of about 7 people, and you're going to have the chance to chat with a smaller group of people. So we have 5 questions that we're going to try to discuss there. So who you are, what you farm, why you want to talk about compaction, what your main takeaway was. And then at the end, you're going to decide on a main question to bring back to the group. So we're going to be in our breakout rooms for about half an hour, and then we're going to all come back, and then we'll be able to start our Q&A time.
And just to add, guys, this is the opportunity for you to turn on your cameras and look each other in the face and have a conversation. Yeah, a conversation is only as good as you make it. And so look to the chat room for a repeat of those 5 conversation starters, and we'll be broadcasting it into the group as well. But also it's straightforward. Let's get to know each other and come up with a question. Come up with maybe an unanswerable question, but the big burning question to bring back to these experts.
You forgot to air quote around experts, Tori. Sorry, we had a router crash upstairs. So
Oh.
Okay, Ken.
Hi, everyone.
It's funny you're drumming there, Tori, because I was just reading up on the drummer from the musical band Rush who passed away in January.
Oh, I didn't
Ron
know that
Pettit.
happened. Oh.
Tori, you look a lot better than you did when you were in our breakout room.
I'm so vain, I need 2 Zoom accounts.
Like
And
5
Woody.
o'clock shadow when it was you in the breakout room, Tori.
And Woody, it's still so bright out where you are. It's pitch black where I am.
Hair off his head.
I was drumming because I'm really excited about the question that my group came up with.
Ooh.
I mean, it's one of those like good, all-encompassing, drawing together multiple learning points kind of questions, which is so smart. Can I go first?
I was
I think
about
you
to say,
need
I think
to.
you need to go first.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. So the question is, what is the best investment for preventing compaction and alleviating compaction?
Warren had the answer to the first one. And it's something we all struggle with every spring.
I think that answers both questions.
Yes,
Well,
that's
yeah,
true.
technically true. So the
Yeah.
P word, hurry up and wait. I guess as far as preventing and alleviating, with the caveat that you need some tools to increase the structure and biological activity in your soil for the alleviation.
And, patience is so important, but, at some point you've got to give up, right? And so 2019 was the perfect example of that. And every year before that, somebody would have phoned me and asked me, and I would have said, wait and you'll win. That would have been wrong last year because we never did get that opportunity. But that's hopefully can't remember his name right now, but one old fella said to me that 2019 is something I hope I learned all kinds of things I hope I never ever have to use again. Who wants to handle the alleviation part of that? I'll start. Again, agrees with Margaret that patience is the biggest piece of that, but you're also trying to make that soil something that can withstand it, right? And it can rebound from it. And so that's the whole aspect of, less tillage, more living crops in the rotation as much of the year as possible so that soil is resilient. In many cases, if you look at parts of the province that haven't had continuous cropping as long and coming out of rotations that had forages in them and livestock with manures, they're, for the most part, more resilient than those soils we see in the Great Southwest and stuff like that. So when you look at what Woody's having to do there, he's made such a good start on pulling together all those best practices that help him to alleviate that and help him to prevent it in the first place.
Alleviation is different than prevention. And there's a certain point where prevention doesn't quite cut it anymore. I think it depends on the type of compaction that you have also. Like if you're in Ian's dream world and you have light equipment and you've just got surface compaction, then things can be pretty easy for you in terms of alleviation, and cover crops might actually fix it. But if you get into deeper compaction and it's very compact, I don't think that's not gonna cut it.
It sure isn't a short-term fix anyways, right?
Yeah, I want to go ahead and throw out an oil fire here. Do say something very controversial just to see what happens. I think subsoiling can be a solution, or a mitigation. Sorry, remediation tool if used properly.
That's not an oil fire at all, man. Mechanical intervention, from my point of view, is necessary depending on the diagnosis. My biggest thing is don't think you have a compaction issue and then rip all 3 feet of topsoil. So you can find the layer that is the issue. If it's a drainage issue, compacted zone, limiting water movement up and down in the water table, get a tillage tool that'll just affect that zone of compaction. So you can talk to your salesperson that wants to sell you the shiny pieces of steel that you wear out in the soil and buy new every 300 acres. But you can do a 7-inch sweep or a regular knife or a tooth or whatever, and kind of get the effect that you're after. That takes trial and error, though.
You got to get down there and make sure that you know where that layer is that you're
you got to, yeah,
just under it, and then go back, dig again, and make sure that you had the intended effect.
Make sure you got it. So I didn't get a chance to get over, but when we did the Elgin Day, they did that tillage demonstration. To me, that was a good example of tillage, because see the effect that you're trying to get, and don't just assume you're getting the outcome you want. That said, after mechanical intervention, you got to integrate some stabilizing effects. So if your stone wall foundation in your barn starting to crumble, you're not just going to lift the barn up and try to pack all of the rubble back up underneath it and make it stay. You're going to try to glue it together. You're going to put rebar in it. You're going to, cement it back together. Same with soil. Once you break it up into little tiny bits, you got to kind of knit it together with some organic matter to make it stick. So that's when your 11 herbs and spices and your cover crop strategy is going to get you fibrous roots and tap roots and all the good stuff, macropores, and throw a handful of worms on it. And then, in my opinion, as a good dairy farmer, son of a dairy farmer, soak it manure. But that's not an option for everybody. I understand that. So
I'm not an anti-tillage guy either, but I'm a let's do it at the right time and in the right conditions. And it's not a simplistic answer, because what I worry about with deep ripping is if it's 14 inches deep and I go 15 to get it, and then the custom guy comes in and puts the manure down and goes over the top of those deep rips, he's going to push that compaction down even further. And so you got to manage that system.
Exactly.
Popping a pimple, it's excising a cancerous growth. You don't just want to go in there with whatever you got laying around and do it any which way. Is that a weird analogy?
A little bit.
Not unexpected.
Yeah, no, it's a serious intervention, and it's got to be taken that way. And so Ian, that once you have something serious, you got to take care of that. You got to make sure that there's a plan in place for recovery. Once you have a surgery or something like that, it's not just back to normal right away. It's make sure that you got a plan in place for, okay, we're gonna do this procedure. We're gonna plan it out, make sure that we're doing it when we're ready, when we've got the right conditions, and we've got a plan for getting back to normal condition.
You got to wear your retainer after you get your braces off, and you got to do the physiotherapy after you have major repairs to your body. It's good. That's a better analogy.
Yeah, thanks. I'm working on it.
Less creepy.
I'm going to throw out a question from our group. Kitty is an extension person with Cornell in, I guess I would call it East Central New York, Kitty. and her interest, having attended the Dundas Day last year and having had Warren come down and speak to her growers in the wintertime, is how does she work to get more guys engaged in the conversation about compaction, taking it seriously and seeing it, so that people start to get it. So that'd be a good question for some of our Ontario farmers to answer for.
Who's going to take it?
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
Thanks
Kitty.
for bringing that up, Ian. This is Kitty. We talked about that in the breakout room, and we talked about beginning perhaps with just providing information about the loads on wheels and axles and so forth. I found that very compelling at the Dundas field day. Would that be a good place to start?
If I may, just from our perspective as an Ontario producer, I think one of the neat parts of explaining the importance of reducing compaction is that is a pretty straight economic argument as to why immediately it can have some serious negative results. And unlike other topics about the benefits of diversity in cropping systems, which obviously have long-term benefits and even medium-term benefits, compaction can show pretty well immediate benefits in the bottom line of many producers' operations. And I think that the economic case for reducing compaction is one of the strongest motivating factors for most producers to take a serious look at it. I don't think it takes long to realize that a lot of the sins we made in 2019 as a result of just trying to get the crop either in the ground or get the harvest completed and get the crop off the field, it could cause some issues that are going to continue forward for years to come, not only affecting 2019's harvest, but potentially, the next 5-10 years in some cases. So I think economics plays a very important role in persuading producers to take it seriously.
Yeah, some good well-timed aerial photos can help, especially if they're tied in with something like what Tony was showing us. Like, here's that traffic that went all over the place, and this is me seeing it in my crop the year after or the year after that. Loss aversion is a strong thing. You can tie that to yield.
So being a good, maybe an average trained engineer, the biggest thing they drill into you is just, have a bunch of pieces of paper around and do stupid, scribble down many types of, what do you call those? Math things. But the dollar value, we struggled, and Tori has tried her best to try to put a dollar value on some compaction stuff. But I think you can get a little bit more of what, sorry, who was just talking there? I didn't catch the name.
Brent Israel.
Yeah, Brent, what Brent was saying. You can do the back of the envelope calculation there. What Tony showed with that one picture with just putting the GPS receiver on the grain cart, kind of showing the total amount of area that's covered. Well, compare that to some of the numbers that Scott Shearer's been presenting, and Ian had it in his slides. The 17 or the 15 or 10% reduction in yield. Well, if all of a sudden you're seeing a 30% trafficability or a 30% coverage on your traffic patterns, wouldn't you want 10% on 30% of your field back? You don't have to have all well, there you go. There's the picture. What's that? Easily 15% of that field, maybe more effective, while there's nothing. So 0% on, or 100% reduction on 15% of my area, that's a lot. That's a lot of money on the table that you can immediately get back. Even cut that in half, cut that down to 50% or whatever. So you can do some of these numbers in your own system, and maybe it's the how much was that GPS receiver, Tony? to get a sense of where you're driving.
Oh, like $100, if not cheaper now.
Yeah. So
I think the magnet to hold it on was the most money. Because the guy didn't know I put it on. Like,
oh, no?
They're good guys. It's just, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, every once in a while, you gotta instill some doubt. Yeah.
I think the hardest problem on the economics is, we can tell them fuel efficiency, we can tell them wear and tear and stuff like that. The safety is a pretty easy sell, but in terms of the actual per acre cost of compaction, it's really tough because it does happen in those wheel tracks, and yet we combine a significant broader width than that, and so it dilutes the compaction in terms of the absolute values. But one of my biggest frustrations, and you pointed it out, Alex, is on the CTIS stuff. The people that will spend $600,000 on a sprayer or whatever, and then just whine about the fact that they got to spend another 25 to 30,000 to put a CTIS system on that'll optimize all the money they've already invested. It's very frustrating.
And go ahead.
Sorry, just to respond to Ian's point there. I know in our case this year, so our primary source of fertilizer for all of our winter cereal acres is a spring application of liquid manure, typically taking place in April. And this was the first spring we were able to use the triaxle spreader with the deflation system. So it didn't take long to just do one check strip at our traditional inflation rate. That was what we ran before, which will allow for, road transport relatively safely and over compaction in the field. And, that was replicated multiple times on the farm this year. And consistently, even though, we've got a 50-foot spread width on the spreader, 25-foot header. So, you get a full round basically per width of spread. We saw a difference in yield that would be around 12 bushels an acre, which is quite substantial. And particularly at the rate we get for organic wheat, that's a major revenue loss and opportunity cost that's on the table just because of compaction. So I think if you can just do replicated on-farm trials, it doesn't take long to see that. And this was not a wet spring either. That's interesting.
And Brett, when you say things
I'm a
like
big
that,
proponent
helping Kitty to understand how to help her guys in New York, which will also help our guys in Ontario, is, what does it take to get that adoption? What did you see that made you make that decision and just jump on the horse and go?
I think it really was 2019. Like, it was such a tough year. And, Jake Cranbrink, he's been kind of on our case for a while to look at a rapid inflation deflation system. And we would go to all the shows and, it looks good, but we'll kind of keep putting it off till the next year. And then it finally just came time where it was like, listen, we learned our lesson in 2019. It almost took it getting that bad in order to realize what we needed to do to improve going forward. And
how many years did you think about it?
Oh, seriously, probably for 2 years.
And how long ago were you first exposed to the concept?
5 years.
I guaranteed you lost the cost of the system in not doing that in the 5 years. Guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, especially in 20, right? Like hauling all that manure on. At that point, we were pretty well. All the manure was applied pre-plant, right? So in that situation, we had to delay planting even further in 2019 because it was just so wet, and even then, it wasn't fit to really haul manure on there. So we had instances where our no manure check was actually yielding higher than, which is really disappointing. Like, I spent all this time just to lose yield and further compact the soil.
Yeah, I think Warren's got a Gehringhoff header that he had a lesson there. I'm a big proponent for on-farm trials. I'm glad you mentioned that because I had a fellow ask me about pinch rows. Should I be planting corn with duals on my tractor or not? I said, plant 2 acres and try it. Wait a year, figure it out. The scary part on-farm trials is it takes you a
Big tires definitely after him.
Always with the cliffhangers.
Yeah, I really wanted to know where he was going with that, and now I don't know if we ever will.
I know.
Just
I
going
still want to know
cover.
what's safer about control tire inflation systems.
Say that again, Tori. You want to know what?
I want to know, well, the last time Alex got cut off, he was in the middle of saying that control tire inflation systems pay for themselves with safer.
Dun, dun, dun.
I would think that's primarily because when you're flying down the road at 50 kilometers an hour with those beautiful IVT transmissions, if you're trying to cut the tire pressure lower, you're going to run into issues with the tire overheating if the pressure is too low. So, just like Warren mentioned, we can go from 30 pounds in the road to 12, 15 pounds in the field pretty well instantaneously. And I think the safety aspect is that you don't run the tire pressure too low at high speeds under load on the road, if I'm understanding it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a function of tire failure, but also stability of the load, right? Like
Yep.
A lot of people are pushing their ability to stop those things with the tractor they've got out in front of that, and you can stop it easier with better tire pressure because you're going to have control of that unit better.
Hey, just a general question to everyone. Is there any equipment companies that are making the tire inflation systems just standard on equipment, like as in an option, or is it still all aftermarket add-ons?
So Fendt has it as a system that you can buy on all of their tractors. The problem is it doesn't have any air storage, so it's got good enough capacity and speed to adjust the tractor tires, but not the implement. And so that's when you need to go to something like the Crane Brink system that has the big tire or the big air storage system.
I know the Kloss forage harvesters as well have the system on it, but same goes as the Fendt. It's just slow to build up pressure and get to the proper inflation.
Rogers refuses to let me finish a thought.
They're on to you.
Yeah, it's conspiracy, man.
Warren, just to help Kitty again, since you've been there to speak with her group and stuff like that, your involvement in the compaction day, what component of that, if they were going to start someplace, would be the place for her to start with her farmers? What was it that got Warren Schneckenberger interested in this whole area of compaction?
Well, for them, just weighing one of those transport trucks they run alongside the harvester with 110 psi road tires should convince every single one of them to not drive a transport truck beside the harvester. But I don't know, that's me. The two guys I mentioned that to disagreed strongly with me, so that's fine.
I'll work on them, Warren.
Are we talking about our group's question, or just catch me up on what we're actually discussing here?
Where do you start to get other people to buy into adopting whatever best management practice to address compaction?
Gotcha. Because this will tie into the question that we had at our group. So
let it rip.
Well, just on CTF, how does forage fit into that system? So planter, harvester, sprayer, that's great. How do you fit balers, forage harvesters, trucks, grain carts, and manure spreaders into a CTF system where manure and what do you call that? Forage. You're making a lot more passes. So
I'd add vegetables into that too. Tomatoes, sugar beets.
Oh my God, don't even start me on vegetables, man.
Everybody likes tomatoes on their ketchup on their hamburgers. So
or even just an aggressive cover cropping system. How does that fit into the concept of CTF?
Well, you could do it easily enough, I think, Alex, with forages, in that if you go with Tony's system of 30 feet, you can easily get a 30-foot mower and you could rake, 60 feet together easy enough to put the forage harvester on. It's just you got to go back to a dump wagon then and empty it at the end of the field, not as a truck's following you down the field.
The issue with that, Ian, is go price out a 35-foot or a triple mower. We bought one. It hasn't paid for itself, but oh my good God, is that nice to have. What do you call that? An oxbow merger. Go price out an oxbow merger.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah.
The other thing is most guys
you can buy
are running,
real estate in Freelton cheaper than you can buy an oxbow mower.
the other thing is most guys are running right beside the truck with that, right? They're not running tip wagons or anything anymore. So I think, you know, the CTF system with the inflation would pay on the trucks, especially if they are going down the road. But trying to convince the custom operators that it's your land that's going to benefit, you know, it is pretty hard in some guys' cases.
Yeah. So if you're playing the CPF game, what, you got $5 million invested in equipment easily to do it yourself completely, or you're twisting somebody's arm to make the right choices as a custom operator working on your farm.
And there are custom guys that have adopted it. So Wilfred Ratz up near Warren, he's put it on two Klaus Xeons with quad tankers on it. And, you know, he says it's cost him a lot of money, but yeah, his customers are happy and he'll pick up customers compared to his other contracting neighbors that don't do the system. It's just a time thing, right?
So that then it becomes a matter of whether you hire them or not.
Exactly. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
As OMAFRA, we should really start to update our custom harvest or custom work rates to include soil health benefits and kind of kickstart that, you know, dollar savings, or should producers be paying more to get the benefits of those technologies.
So Tony, can you tell us how you get the 30 feet with the buggy? Did you put a thing on the buggy, or did you put a longer auger on, or what did you do?
It was quite scientific. I parked the buggy on one lane, the combine on the other, and then measured how big of a spout I needed to reach it. And then structurally just beefed out the flange system on the combine. It actually was only like an extra 12 inches or 14 inches or something. And then the spout, like the actual exit spout, we just bought a modern one that was like, it moved it another kind of 20 inches just because it was on like a 45-degree angle, like the big black tube ones or whatever, poly ones. So
what color combine is that?
It's a shiny red one.
Oh, they have a better auger on them, arguably, anyways. So,
and then in Western Canada, the challenge there is the 40-foot systems. So what goes on out there at my wife's family farm is on the buggy. There's a couple aftermarket brands that they call it like it's like a belt lifter that's probably about 10 feet that slides with the width and up and down the length of the buggy, and it just carries the grain over. If you Google it, they use them in Australia a lot, things like that. So there's another thing to spend your money on, but
like a potato loader.
Yeah, it's basically a conveyor that's about 10 feet by 10 feet, and it just moves the length of the buggy based on, but it's easy because the guy's literally driving on a guidance line, the buggy. So that's all he has to operate. He just has to catch the grain, or the combine operator just has to hit that pad and just kind of
you're not trying to, line up a dual 800s on a 4-wheel drive tractor 8 inches from the nose cone of a header.
Yep.
And then navigate a headland, because the farmer absolutely has to unload on the go around a headland in Alberta, around a slough, because that's, saving us so much time. Sorry, touched a nerve. Tony, buggy size. How did you work that into your CTF?
We're small. We kind of shifted. We run a lot of light equipment that's, I guess, barely big enough, it feels like some days. So our buggy currently is only 550. So it holds 2 full dumps with the corn, like in corn on the go, and it kind of maths there. But it's tight sometimes. So full disclaimer, yeah, we make mistakes out in the field, and sometimes, you know, you got to get off or pull off and things like that. But at the end of the day, the guys operating it know, believe it or not, the buggy tractor has operational RTK guidance that's turned on during harvest. So he hits auto steer and he gets to a line and away he goes out to the end. So that's kind of how we've managed it. But
yeah, you can't go too small because then you're picking up, you know, not quite on a full round. The Goldilocks is to pick up, make the combine go a full round or a half a round. So you're kind of near an end and you're picking up at the same time, just to get a consistent pattern. But then you showed us your field shapes there. That's challenging to do. So
ideally we should be at like a 700 to 800 and just not fill the thing all the time.
Right.
But I don't know if that's something that you can tell a guy not to do. It's just, if it's there, he's gonna.
No, trust me, you definitely
Yeah.
don't need a 3,000 bushel grain cart. What do you mean I don't need a 3,000
When
bushel
it's full,
grain cart?
it's like, all right, I know he's not smashing the crap out of everything, and he's only got, you know, 500 bushels on. So
Yeah.
But the other thing too, we've noticed with clients and customers is the difference between, you know, 1,000 bushels of wheat and 1,000 bushels of corn definitely make a difference in the field that guys don't realize. You know, they just think a full buggy is a full buggy. So a lot of that weighs in as well. So definitely we limit it more to the dense heavy crops and things like that. But yeah, the buggy is the tricky one. I would say in any controlled traffic system, it's the, you know, getting the crop out. But if one thing we do have with our farms now is we have, you know, the designated exit lanes and directions. So everybody pushes out to the headlands and gets out that way. Seems like a longer drive, but at least they're not going through the center of the field, right? So.
And Tony, do you, I know it's a smaller buggy than a lot of guys are running nowadays, but do you, like if you come up to the headland, do you dump even if your combine's not full just so that he doesn't have to chase you down the field?
Yeah, usually. Like one thing with a small combine and a tractor is like there's no limits to speed and compaction. You can haul ass out there if you want, right? Like you're still driving, so you can have lighter, quicker, mobile, better logistics than a big heavy thing that drags all over the place, right? So we kind of maybe are a little more nimble with the lighter one, but yeah, a lot of the farms, there's a lot of talk on the radio, I guess you could say, with giving guys direction on, hey, I'm going to be like, no, I got this much on me, go to that end, this end, and stuff like that. But yeah.
So I have a question for Alex and Ian, and it's something that I've been thinking of for a while. We used to do a lot of drag lining manure on our farm, and it's always a pain in the ass to set up. We didn't obviously have the, you know, beautiful Cadman reel that they have now that you can just whack on the acres. But I've thought about, like, in terms of efficiencies, is there any way, we also use Willinga Agrovac to convey most of our grain. So is there any way that people are working on being able to use effectively a dragline system to remove grain from the fields?
No, but you need to work for an idea company and come up with those ideas, because that would be pretty cool.
Like you think of the amount of the sheer weight of manure that's applied in a liquid form. If you're putting on 5,000 gallons an acre, that's way more grain than you're ever going to harvest off of, well, at least we're going to harvest, you know, at 8 pounds per gallon.
Yep.
40,000 pounds an acre of grain.
Sorry, go ahead. Who's on the phone there? Nope, nobody. Well, I'm an engineering standpoint, I don't know whether that's possible. I'm sure I should know. I worked in a lab for 4 years that did two-phase flow through tubes. So airflow through a pipe with the bluff body. Kind of hard, but wow, that's a thought. Drag lines, not immune. The actual draft force pulling a drag line, 8 pounds per gallon roughly, on a roughly 6 to 8 inch pipe. You can get, what's that, cubic foot, gallons to cubic foot, something. There's, thousands of gallons in a pipe depending on how long your field is. That's a heavy pull. So you're not out of the woods as far as load's concerned. We have a so and it's hard to set up. So that might be something to consider as a thought experiment. Is there a paradigm that we can get crop out of the field that's different from the wheelbarrows and horse-drawn wagons? Yeah.
It just seems like we're the same thought concept as the seed drill, which really hasn't evolved very much in the years. It works, so we haven't had to challenge it too much. But I just thought that we like conveying grain with air instead of augers any day of the week.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know about it in that context, Brett, but working with Ole Green from Aaron's University in Denmark, and Scott Shearer at Ohio State is working on systems in sort of the next phase of precision ag, like precision ag 5 type of thing. And they have robotic systems that they're working on, because that was always my stumbling block. I can take a little Xavier fit system out and individually plant corn plants in a swarm technology, but how on earth would you get the big yields out of the field? I haven't seen it, but they have both assured me that they are working on systems that would still allow the miniaturization of the harvest aspect of cropping as well. That is intriguing.
This kind of gets all muddied too when you look at the scale. Ontario is a good scale to be able to have these conversations. If you asked a farmer out in Saskatchewan with 30,000 acres whether he wants to vacuum his grain out of the field, no, they want a big buggy. Because when I was on wheat harvest, we were 3 combines and we had a 2,000 bushel grain cart, and he was as fast as he could go to get crop out of the field. So the logistics the economies of scale don't work for small equipment totally. Labor and blah 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 blah. So we're kind of in a niche area with our sub 10,000 acre farms here in Ontario, because we can start to have these unique out of the box conversations.
And it also depends on the road structure, because in the West, there's a guy there, Mike Mitchell, he's on YouTube all the time, and he's an interesting guy to follow. I figure they're farming about 60,000 acres. They got 7 ideal 9 combines and 6 Bogart 83-foot seeders and stuff like that. Some of those fields are over 2,000 acres, so exactly what Alex is saying. But in the eastern part, like the Corn Belt and the eastern part, where you have roads every mile square, you've got the road structure that would allow that to happen.
So we just need some investors now. That's what you're saying, Ian.
Yeah.
Well, they're out there. There's people looking at agriculture as a big investment. And just, we don't want them buying up all the farms. We'd rather them invest in our farms as a minor partner, I guess.
We can always convert Keystone XL to ship grain to the coast.
Yeah, that's a neat idea. There you go.
Oh, someone would block the pipeline.
Too dangerous.
That's an entirely different conversation.
I have a question, if I'm allowed to ask. Does the tread pattern or the lugs on a tire make any difference
Sure
when it comes
does.
to compaction.
Sure does. So we accidentally learned that at Elgin because I kind of goofed installing some sensors, so I had them crisscrossed, so they weren't totally lined up vertically. And on hard ground where you're not sinking into the soil, ironically, so you need a little bit of moisture to be able to kind of spread the load. If you're just running on wheel lugs, you've got thousands of little tires underneath, there's thousands of little point loads underneath that wheel down the length of the field. So lug pattern is something to think about. Obviously, there's I could go on for days about tire soil interaction and traction efficiency and horsepower and blah blah blah. But generally, it's gonna be wet enough, unless it was like well, this year probably is not dry. It's dry as it's ever been. So yeah, lugs. You if you wanted to, you could switch to all just diamond style or diamond tread turf tires, like Brett's picture there. But I mean, they don't pull well when it's wet. So
what do you need to do though? Like if you go to a system like Woody's got with the biostrips and stuff like that, he doesn't need the pulling capacity. He just needs to get the planter through the field. Maybe a tire like that isn't such a bad idea.
And that's one of those things where you have to try it in your context and whether you like it or not. It's the same thing. The conversation we had about tracks or tires, when to use each other. Well, when do you use a W tread or a 23-degree bar or a diamond tread or, completely trashed, bald, super single truck tires or.
And Alex, to answer Woody's question further is, what's that crazy plate thing that was going to cost us $250,000 to buy?
The tech scan unit.
Unit. So
if you've ever been to
Ohio State has access to one of those. And last year in September, Midas Tires dropped off 4 semi-loads of tires, and they spent 2-3 weeks switching all kinds of different tire sizes and types and such on a set of 3 case quads, and he put them all across those tech scans. And I'm trying to get him to come and speak on that at our virtual conference in January this winter. So you'll see very much what you're asking for in that, Woody.
Just for context, if you've ever been to Mark's Work Warehouse and stood on the Dr. Scholl's temperature, stand on here and figure out what style of insole you need, that's the thing we're talking about. You're finding those pressure points underneath that tire. So, are you a high arch or a low arch? That's kind of what that technology was doing.
So what he should just take his tire to Mark's Work Warehouse.
Yeah, just wheel it. I said to a salesman one day, he was asking, he's like, "Oh, do you need help getting some insoles?" I said, "No, I want the display."
So I should be shaving my tires down like a tractor puller.
What's that? Sorry.
Okay, I've gotten a question from a grower, and I think I answered it correctly, but curious to hear from the load expert there. What's the comparison of damage between like a single pass versus a stationary piece? So like you're driving over it, it's still one pass, but if you park it and then walk away for a week, how much more damage is that doing?
An engineer and an agronomist will answer that question differently.
Well, it's a good thing we have both.
The engineer would tell you, which Alex should be saying, the engineer will tell you that you're doing 85% of the damage with the first pass, which is probably true. But the agronomist will say it depends on whether that 85% is enough to do a impact on the yield or not. Sometimes you can get away with that first pass and not have a yield effect, and the second pass is what comes to get you, because it puts you to 85 or 87%, which is where it triggers the impact on yield. So that kind of asks the question: do you travel in the same track, or do you? What's that thing that the when you skew?
Crab steer.
Crab steer, or do you crab steer? And again, the problem is questions are so hard to answer in a vacuum because how much weight, at what time, what kind of tires, there's a whole bunch of questions that need to be asked. But
if you asked a good civil engineer building roads, getting to 95% proctor density to pack a road, getting, near 100% consolidation, takes a specific amount of moisture and a certain amount of time. So the answer to stationary versus moving, the interaction, water is incompressible. Everyone knows this. So if you've got enough water in your soil and you drive over it, if that water is not allowed to drain away from those soil particles, it will actually bear load. So the engineering answer is it's complicated. If you leave it there for an amount of time, now you have more time for that water to drain out of those soil particles. Once it moves out of the way, now I can push those soil particles closer together. You've learned this when you said, you can unhook, put the jack down on a tongue on a loaded piece of equipment, and it's fine for 2 hours. Go eat your lunch, whatever, come back. You can still put your semi under it, hook up to the drawbar, no problem. Leave it there over the winter, and the tongue's sitting on the ground. And now we've, got a big issue, and that's that whole time piece. Given enough time, water will be pushed out of soil because it doesn't have the hydrostatic capillary action to maintain that pore pressure. There's the engineering answer for you.
But you also got to consider the porosity impact, though, too, Alex.
Yeah, so it's a complex piece of onions, and I tried to make the I want to build the tool to do it on the tailgate of our truck, but it's like you got to do it in a lab. So I'm not about that life.
All right, do we still have two groups that need to ask their questions? Or are we done asking questions?
I'd like to ask a question.
You already asked a question, Ian.
Oh, okay.
I'm just for some of those other groups, if they haven't brought the group their breakout room questions, now's the time. Otherwise, Ian's going to ask another question.
I think that's a go, Ian. Let's hear it.
So, Woody, I haven't had the chance to get down and see your system, but I follow it on what you're doing with Twitter and stuff. This whole aspect of the biostrips and running on that living platform all year long, it's sort of the next step from the biostrippers who have it living into the spring, plant the crop, and then spray it off with Roundup. You've got that living presence there in the wheel tracks all the time. What are you seeing with that from the standpoint of its ability to reduce the potential for compaction in your system?
I see somewhere between a padded room and a straitjacket for myself. I'm just trying to get the bugs out of it. So coming out of year 2, Ian, yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to comment too much on it yet. My tires stay clean. As far as compaction, in this system, I have to go through it maybe more than I should, and I have to go when I shouldn't be going. I don't know yet.
It's just, I'm very intrigued, Woody, that where does that step take us in this whole question, if you can make that work for everybody. So keep going, man.
Yeah, just give me a rubber tractor and a soft broom, and I'll play with it for days.
Just Go ahead and step on the grenade, would you, Woody? For the rest of us.
Take a flying leap and throw my body on a grenade. Yeah.
But Warren, with your strip tilling, back to this question about the treads, could we go to a diamond tire in your scenario? Because you don't need the pulling capacity either, do you? Maybe you do on the strip tiller, but you wouldn't on the planter.
Good question. I am willing to accept OMAFRA funding to invest in tires to do the 10-year study.
Well, and if you've got enough organic matter, who's to say you can't just run 2 skis? Like, right? So, that's an interesting. Skis are basically tracks are basically what a C track unit is basically a ski, anyways. So, that's a hard one.
You go to hovercraft, Warren?
Yeah, that would be ideal. I don't know how a diamond tread would perform in snow.
Doesn't do well and all that. Snow and mud, they will not turn, period.
And yeah, like every year we're harvesting in snow. This year we were planting in snow.
By choice, though.
Yeah, and our clay, when it is not ideal conditions, I could see diamond treads. Everyone went away from them on grain carts and manure spreaders because they quit turning in mud.
And we're still archaic enough that we're at home, we're still ground drive. So we were too scared 8 years ago to switch to hydraulic drive because that meant GPS and yada yada yada. Well, not really, but and we rely on traction there. So
think about the dot system though, is that you don't have to turn. You can just get to the end and then turn the wheels and then move sideways and then go back the other way. You don't have to turn. It's interesting.
Yeah, you need a 2-way drill.
I didn't think about that.
There you go. A 6-row rollover drill.
Okay, this is quickly devolving.
This is just turning into garage conversation.
And it's almost 10 o'clock, which tells me that, this has been a really great topic of conversation. I want to urge you all, if there's a burning question or a topic that you would love to continue the conversation on, hit me up, tell me about it, and we'll make it happen. I also want to give Woody the opportunity to plug the next upcoming Take 5 on stripping.
And it's not me. So we have 5 farmers from around the province and 1 from Michigan, talking about how they integrate strip till into their farming systems. A tomato sugar beet strip till guy, a cover crop sugar beet combination guy from Michigan, a nice young fellow by the name of Tyler McBlain, who's been really moving forward in strip tilling into cover crops.
On tough dirt.
And Harry Biermans, who covers a lot of acres and is exploring biostrips as well a little bit. So large scale operation. And a father and daughter combination from Eastern Ontario that I don't know a lot about, but just beginners in the strip till system. So if you're interested in strip till of any sort, maybe even touch on biostrips a little, next Monday, or a week from Monday.
Cool. Oh my gosh. Oh, wait, did I cut you off, Woody?
And nobody takes their clothes off if that's what you're worried about.
Why not?
Or disappointed.
Well, thank you so much to our speakers, Warren, Alex, Tony, and Ian. You pulled together a lot of content into a short amount of time. I really appreciate that that you're still willing to work with me. And thank you to everyone for participating in this conversation. I think the more that we get to know each other in this format, the better the conversations will be, as we've been seeing kind of gradually over time with these Take Fives. Zoom is not the ideal. Sometime or someday in the future, we'll be able to huddle up in a soil pit together. But for the time being, we're so happy to be able to bring everyone together on this platform.
But there was a precedence for running around naked in Warren's Zoom meeting we had the other day, where Warren's young child ran across the room and
Not me.
Not Warren. Not Warren. That's
Not
not.
Warren,
Don't expect that.
a 2-year-old maybe.
Which is actually why I'm in the shop, because the girls were not in a go to sleep kind of mood. They were in a run around naked kind of mood.
Smart choice. I've seen so many toddler butts this past month. You have no idea. Yeah, thank you all so much for your participation. If you have additional topics for Compaction, send them on in to me, and we'll do a free pop-up Let's Talk Soil to talk about it. But have a good night, everyone. Sleep well.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.